You know I'm right. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, our guest today, they say people have different blood types, but his blood type is big blue.
Absolutely. He is somebody who's got off the charts energy, and I'm usually the one here who's carrying the Monster Energy drinks and drinking them as we're doing our programming, and you can see it on video. But I didn't need it today because I mentally focused yesterday, and I realized that I was going to have to bring my energy up. So we're really happy to have him on, Giants beat writer Paul Dottino. Paul, welcome to the show. Good morning. How you doing?
Welcome. Yeah, it's great to be here, fellas. You know, what I didn't tell you before the show is that Monster Energy got their formula from my bloodstream.
Paul, I'm thinking not, but do you use any caffeine? Like you get coffee, energy drinks,
No,
iced tea,
you know what's really funny about it, guys? I used to drink a lot of cola earlier in my life, and some years ago, I developed almost like an allergic reaction to caffeine. So now, while I still drink colas, I do drink a lot more of the 7-Up and Sierra Mist variety, lemonade and water and stuff of that. I kind of weaned myself off a lot of the colas in recent years. Not that anybody could tell the difference, though.
No.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This year was probably different for you, though. No road trips, no early morning flights or anything.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you guys, there were a lot of things that were different this year. And it wasn't just not being able to make the road trips. It was also very limited availability at practice. It was the fact that we could not talk to any of the coaches or the players or the front office people in person. I can honestly tell you it was difficult. It was a lot less enjoyable. It made you feel much more detached. For someone who's been, look, I'm going into my 39th straight season of covering the Giants. That's well over half of my life. Okay, you can do the math. So this is what I am. This is what I know. This is what I do. And to then be told that, okay, guess what? You're going to be restricted to a computer screen. Very difficult. I'm not going to lie to you. It was really, really weird. It was almost like eating a pizza without cheese and oregano on it.
Right.
But hey, but it's still food. Okay, it's still food, and when you're hungry, it's really great, and you're happy to have it. And I understand the world had many more things to think about. There were many more people who were less fortunate, who had to suffer through a lot worse than just not being able to cover the football team that you want to cover in the ways that you're supposed to be covering it. I totally understand that. So please let me make this clear. I'm not complaining, but I am telling you that the difference in coverage was dramatic in terms of what we were allowed to do and what we were capable of doing. I hope the fans did not notice a significant drop off, but I can tell you from somebody who's been in the pits for decades, I know that there was, and I feel bad about that. And I'm doing my best to try to keep my level as high as I can, despite the fact that all of the situations have been basically, mutated.
Absolutely. I think you guys have done a great job. Don't be so hard on yourself.
I appreciate it.
Pizza. You mentioned pizza. I got to ask you, what's your favorite pizza in the area?
Well, to be perfectly frank with you, the pizza over the course of the years hasn't been as good as it could have been. I think there have been some people taking some shortcuts, is what I think. I think that I was very, very fortunate. The last time I was in Chicago, I had some deep dish, okay? And that was pretty dynamite, I got to be honest. And I kind of wish that we had more games in Chicago over the next few years so that I could get some of that stuff.
Paul, what's your go-to food or snack when you're in the press box during the game?
I try not to eat very much when I'm in the box on game day. I get very intense, in case you haven't noticed. and the intensity and the energy of game day is enough to give somebody a heavy-duty agita and indigestion. So I try not to eat very much. Now, if it's a 1 o'clock game, they will have scrambled eggs available for brunch. and I'll usually have a little bit of scrambled eggs, maybe a couple of forkfuls of hash browns, maybe a slice of bacon, and that's it. Because I can't really do anything else at halftime. Occasionally, I will have a few chicken tenders if they have those, but no sauce on it or anything like that. I got to be as plain as can be. The adjutant just does not sit well with a full stomach. You understand, fellas?
Yes.
It's not good.
Well, we understand.
No doubt about it. Now, Paul, I guess, you got to keep your energy up because, well, for so many years, we're used to seeing right after the game, you're running on the field, you're doing the interviews, obviously not this year. And, I just love the Giants post game was right after the game. This year was 11:30 p.m. Any chance we could get the post game back to being post game?
I certainly hope so. You have to understand that part of the component of having the live post game show right after the game was over was the fact that I could be on the field.
Right.
And I could talk to these guys as they were coming off. I could get their immediate reactions. I could get their immediate emotions. And there was a lot of value in that. That was all lost because of the pandemic protocols. All of a sudden it's like, well, we can't do any interviews on the field anymore. We can't bring guys into the coaches club anymore where I would have a relaxed atmosphere with a player and sit down with him for 4 minutes and do a little bit more of an in-depth interview. That was all lost. League regulation said, this is not going to happen anymore, fellas. So what do you do? Well, the only thing we can do to bring the fans post-game reaction was to plug into the Zoom calls and then put the Zoom calls on as part of the post-game show. It did not make sense, given the parameters we had, to do a live program, because where's the value in live at that point? We're not being able to give them anything with it that's human. We're giving them video screen stuff. So that's a lot of what went into shortening the program, reformatting the program, putting it then on tape delay, where then they also had the opportunity in some cases to get some highlights in there, which we could not do prior. The networks have a window on game day where you cannot use any highlights in your post-game show. So there were a lot of factors that kind of came into play. What happens this year? It's still up in the air. I'll be honest with you. I know that, they will talk about all of these different things, what worked, what didn't work, what can we do better. Ultimately, it will come down to what will the NFL allow us to do.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
I missed it, though. I'm not going to lie to you. I missed it, tremendously. Part of the thrill of my job is watching that clock go down to zero and then making a beeline for the guys that I want to get on the field, especially because there were times that I would have to outrace the networks out there to get a guy that I wanted. And I was like, hey, they're not getting him. He's mine. And I would outrace them to the player. That was always kind of fun, too.
Paul, what do you think your 40 time is?
Well, we're talking in minutes or hours. I will say this. For a guy who's 56 years old, I'm pretty fleet of foot.
No doubt about it.
But no, it was always a challenge, and I relished it. And my adrenaline would be popping. The game's over, and the players are coming down because the game is over. My adrenaline's going up because I can't wait to get out there and race out to get my guy.
Right.
So that was always really a lot of fun for me. And then obviously, because we weren't allowed to make road trips, that was the other problem. Well, if I can't make the road trips, well, then I can't get the guys on the field on the road either. And that was also an important part of the post-game show. So who knows, fellas? Who knows?
Yeah, Paul, I think the thing about your energy, it's great, especially on the radio with WFAN, but it's just not the same without Joe Beningo. You and Joe talking football was just off the charts, like amazing. You giving the injury reports to him, and he was just, absolute legend. We definitely miss him.
Well, I had a lot of fun with Joe, too. Fellow Paisan, of course. We'd always try to put a food reference in there somehow, some way during the course of the guest spots. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, Joe, diehard, green-blooded Jets fan. Me covering the Giants for nearly 40 years. So, we would always have ribs against each other and poke each other a little bit over our backgrounds and our frames of reference. But ultimately, what I loved about being on with Joe and Evan, and we did it, for 11 years, I guess it was, that I did weekly hits with them during the season. What I loved about it was, even though we could jab and poke fun sometimes at each other, we had a good time. And they always asked me for information. It wasn't just opinions. It was, no, Paul, you're a beat reporter. Tell us what happened at practice today. Tell us what the injury report is. Tell us what matchups, we should be looking for. And what I really loved about it was that they were willing to listen and say, okay, look, you're there. You're at practice. You see what's going on. A lot of times hosts will have guests on a program and they'll want them to just parrot their philosophy or their opinion. And they'll just try to put words in their mouth to get them to agree with what they're thinking. It was never that way with Joe and Evan. It was, they're going to ask a question. I'm going to give them the information. If they want my opinion, they'll come back and follow up and ask for my opinion. And then if they wanted to joust, we would joust. That's fine. But the information was always the priority with those guys. And that's what I loved about doing those spots with them, because I felt like we were giving people information and we were telling them what's going on today at the facility. I don't think enough of spots around the generic media do that.
I totally agree with you. And it's interesting you mentioned all that, because the dichotomy between Nick and I, what we do here, is very, very similar. See, I'm a Yankees fan, I'm a Jets fan. Nick's a Giants fan, and he's a Mets fan. So we tend to balance each other out, and the same way that you feel about Joe is the same way I feel about Nick. And we're not really as combative or anything, but we are fellow paisans, and we definitely all have that in common, which is really, really funny.
Yeah, it was always friendly jousting when we went at it like that. It was never any mean-spirited feelings. And there were some fans who would actually send me messages on Twitter suggesting that, Joe and I disliked each other. That was never the case, ever. It was all fun and in good spirit. And look, Joe knows who he is. I know who I am. We would have fun even making fun of ourselves. I mean, because we were there to have a good time and to be entertaining, but most importantly, we were there to get the information out. We always made sure that the information from the facility that day, from the practice, from the injury report, from the lineup changes, we always made sure that that was the priority, and that's what was going to get out of those spots. So I thank you guys for paying attention and taking your time to listen.
Yeah, one of the best injury reports, I think you were giving an update on Jacobs and Snee, and Joe thought you said Jacobs Snee. So that was just hysterical. One of the best Joe moments. You mentioned the Coaches Club. I do want to point out that I saw you. I was in there for the first XFL Guardians game. And Paul, you are one tall guy. I mean,
6'1".
6'1". People don't realize that, and I guess because you're standing next to these athletes. But you're a tall guy. Growing up, did you play any sports, any basketball or any football?
I didn't letter in high school at all. In fact, I was the PA announcer for the boys basketball team in high school. Everybody wanted, look, the whole school was like, Paul, you got to do this, because I was the voice,
All right.
So that's what I did in high school and in college. I never played, on an organized, varsity team or college team, but obviously played pickup all the time. I mean, street hockey and wiffle ball and flag football and all that stuff, hoops. I mean, who didn't do that? I mean, that was always part of the deal. But the funny part about it was, I always had wanted to be a broadcaster. In fact, since I was 5 years old, my dream, listening to Marty Glickman and Sam Hoff and Chip Sapola doing Giants games on the radio on the old WNEW 1130, since I was 5, that's the job that I wanted. I wanted to be a New York Giants sportscaster. And it never occurred to me that I would do anything else. No, this was what it was going to be. So I truly am living out the dream and what I think I was meant to do, which is why I tell people all the time, they ask me, how is it you could do this so long and like still be energetic and still care and still want to do it? And I tell them, because the fire has never gone out. This fire has been inside of me since I was 5 years old. And honestly, I mean this wholeheartedly, I plan on covering the Giants for a minimum of 50 consecutive years. All right. I'm going into my 39th now. I plan on doing at least 50, unless somebody takes it away from me. I'm never going to leave. I'm never going to quit. Now, after 50, I don't know. I will be getting kind of on the other side at that point. I don't know. Will I finally fade out? Maybe I will. Or maybe I'll want to go to 60 years. I don't know.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short, Paul. I mean, 11 years is nothing.
I just can't see the time where I'm going to stop because, fellas, I not only love it as much today as I did the day I started, I might love it more because I know so much more about the game than I did when I started. And I just think the National Football League is the greatest league in the greatest sport in the universe.
So you mentioned, going to college because you wanted to pursue this dream here. You go to Fordham. I want to know what activities or steps did you take while you were in Fordham that ended up leading to you getting your first journalism job right out of school?
Well, no, it was when I was in school.
Wow.
When I was a sophomore in 1983, I got a job in the sports department of what was then called the Bergen Record, North Jersey newspaper, suburban newspaper. And I did that in 1983. And that was the first year that I was in the business, but also that was my first year technically as an on-air announcer at WFUV. And it was because of WFUV that I started to cover the Giants. And that's why I consider that my first year, because even though it was college and I wasn't paid for it, I was still going to practice. I was still in the locker room. I was still interviewing those players. I was there for Bill Parcells' rookie season as the Giants head coach. They were 3-12-1. Okay. And I was there every week and I would watch practice and I'd talk to Parcells and all the players. And so that's my first year. And that's because through WFUV, I called the Giants, asked them about being accredited media. They said, well, we don't allow college media to come to the games. And I said, that's all right. What about the press conferences and the practices? And they said, well, this is the opening day at training camp in July of 1983. It was up at Pace University. And they said to me, well, this is what we do. This is what you can do. And we'll take it from there. They didn't make me any promises that I could continue. See, I told them I wanted to be a beat reporter. I wanted to be around the team as a regular. Mm-hmm. I didn't just want to come and, cherry pick. I didn't want to be a guy who would just come every once in a while. I said to them, no, seriously, this is what I'm going to do with my life. So I might as well start now. So they brought me up there. And so I went to the first, the media picnic, which was the opening of training camp at Pace University. And I'll never forget it because I went there that first day. And then after the day was over, I went up to PR. Ed Croak was the PR guy, longtime PR guy at the time. And I said, Ed, I'm serious. I said, I'd like to keep doing this. He said, all right, well, you got through today, okay? If you follow all the rules, you do what you're supposed to do, you act as a professional, and, you show that you were real serious about this, we will allow you to continue to come to the press conferences and the practices during the week. Now, you still can't come to the games, but we will treat you as one of the regulars if you conduct yourself accordingly. Well, those were my magic words. I heard that. It's like, hey, tell me to stand on my head. I'll do it. That's a done deal. And so that's exactly how it happened. Went up to Pace a couple more times during the camp. And then when they broke camp and came down to the Meadowlands, I showed up there first thing and they let me in and they watched me carefully. They saw that I was doing everything that I was supposed to do, didn't break any rules, followed protocols, not obviously pandemic protocols, but NFL protocols. And that's where it all started for me. And I can honestly tell you that it was a big thrill then, and it's still a big thrill today. It's never, ever changed for me. And that's how it all started. But I give credit to the Giants front office staff for allowing me the opportunity to prove myself that I was serious, and this wasn't a joke, and I wasn't some kid who was just goofing around or doing this as a hobby. I knew it was going to be my life, and they obviously saw that from the very beginning.
So it seems like if you have ties to the local area here, your rite of passage is either you work at Newsday or you work at the Record. Seems like that's the way everybody is. But I also want to mention Fordham specifically for a second because there are also strong ties between the New York area and that school.
Yeah.
Specifically, we have Mike Breen. We have Michael Kay, who I believe actually attended Fordham while you were at Fordham. And we've had
Breen did. KK was actually, he got out a year before I did.
Okay. So
Okay. I got to Fordham in the fall of '82.
Okay.
And I got approved to go on the air by sports director Charlie Slows in 1983. Mike Breen was Charlie. I don't know if you guys know who Charlie Slows is, but he's the play-by-play voice of the Washington Nationals right now. Okay, he announced their World Series championship. Very well known. For years, he did the Washington Bullets. He did the Tampa Bay Rays, and right now he's with the Washington Nationals. He was the sports director when I got there. Mike Breen was his assistant. My first on-air spot, okay, with WFUV, when I first co-hosted One-on-One, their sports talk show, was co-hosting with Mike Breen, believe it or not. And that was the first time I actually got on the air to co-host a show. It was Dottino and Breen. So we did cross paths in that regard, but I did not cross paths with Michael Kay. He was a year earlier. But I was Mike in my WFUV group, Bob Papa, Jack Curry, John Giannone.
Wow.
I mean,
an illustrious list.
Big time heavy hitters.
Elite list.
You know,
so who's
we don't take a backseat to Syracuse because remember, Orange just remember that.
Did Mike Breen have his catchphrase bang back then too, or that came later on?
No, that came later. I think that actually might have come, you'd have to ask Mike, that might have come after he got out of Fordham. He was doing Marist basketball on local cable.
He did.
Up in, I think, Westchester County.
He did.
And I'm pretty sure that may be where that started, but I can't say for sure.
So I definitely want to get into your WFAN and MSG stuff. But first, I want to ask you how you got involved with the Northeast Conference. Joe and I live on Staten Island, so we've seen you sometimes doing Wagner games. Yeah. Right. So, Northeast Conference, pretty competitive for the most part. And it seems to be a bit of a change of pace for you, especially with the basketball coming off Giant seasons. But what do you enjoy about that job, and how did that opportunity come about?
Well, you got to understand that, at FUV, we had the opportunity to do play-by-play of football, of basketball, and of baseball. Did not do play-by-play for hockey because they had a club hockey team at the time, and the student station did not do those games. So I had no experience doing hockey, but football, basketball, and baseball were the three sports that I had experience at FUV doing. So I enjoy doing basketball play-by-play very much. I really do. I mean, football is my number one sport, but I'd say basketball would be number two in terms of calling a game. So it was really pretty simple for me. I always configured all of my work around the Giants. Okay. I made sure that I took classes around the Giants practice times so that I could go to practice. I mean, I know my professors never wanted to hear any of this, and neither did my parents. Neither do professors when they asked me to come back and speak. I warn them. I say, listen, I got to let you know this. If you want me to get up in front of your class and tell the truth, here's the truth. I took all the mandatories, and then I obviously want to be a communications major. But my true schooling came at WFUV, at the radio station. It didn't really come in the classroom, okay? Furthermore, I took classes just to get the credits, to get everything I had to get, but my classes were planned around Giants practice. Not only that, in the spring, I planned my classes around New Jersey Generals practice. I covered the Generals of the USFL for 3 straight years. And by the way, they did credential me for home games. My first ever interview for WFUV was in the spring of 1983. I sat at the locker of Herschel Walker,
Wow.
who had just signed with the New Jersey Generals, and they had just done their first practice at the Meadowlands. And he had talked to all the writers, and I had my recorder with me, and I was going to do an interview for WFUV. I asked him to do the interview, and he and I sat down and I did a one-on-one with Herschel Walker.
That's great.
He thanked me after I did the interview. Never, ever again did I come across a professional athlete who thanked me after every single time I interviewed him, and that was Herschel Walker. Even when he got to the Giants many years later in 1995, when he signed as a free agent and was with the Giants for 1 year, every single time I would talk to him for an interview, he would always say thank you. I can't say enough about Herschel Walker. Special guy in my book. Having said that, the point is, I took classes to make sure that I would have off on certain days and certain times of the day so that I could race back from Fordham across the bridge to get to Giants practice. Sometimes I even had to go to early morning class, go to Giants practice, and then go back. But this was me, because I knew that's what I'm going to do. So nothing's going to stop me, including their schedule at the school. All right. Having said that, I got lost. You asked me a question.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to know how you got started with Northeast Conference.
Oh, how did I start the NEC? Well, because everything that I do revolves around the Giants. It always does. It always has and always will. I needed to find out if there was going to be a conference or a school where if I could hook up and get some basketball work, which I wanted, knowing that basketball, runs January, February into March, I was going to have to get someplace that was logistically going to blend with my ability to stay in the area and not get caught on too many road trips that were going to take me far away, which would require me not to be around the Giants, especially in the months of November and December. What's the natural? Northeast Conference. At that time, especially before they changed some of their teams in the last several years, everybody was close, except for St. Francis, Pennsylvania, Robert Morris, and in those days, UMBC, because they were in the Northeast Conference before they went to the America East. So knowing that 85% of their schools were within a 2-hour drive made perfect sense. So I wound up going to Fairleigh Dickinson and asking them if they needed a radio guy, and they wound up hiring me to do some games for them. And that was really cool because Fairleigh Dickinson was, as you know, in Bergen County, very close to the Giants. So that made a lot of sense. I did some games for them, a limited schedule. From doing that, I got introduced to the commissioner of the conference, who happened to be a diehard Giants fan. So he knew who I was. And I said, look, I'd be really happy to, be part of your package somehow, some way. And lo and behold, they decided that they were going to increase their television package. In those days, they were on Sports Channel. Okay, that's what it was called in those days before it became Fox Sports New York. Okay, now wind up, now it's MSG Plus and Yes and all that other stuff. In those days, it was Sports Channel. They were leaving Sports Channel to go to MSG, and they were expanding their television package. And he said to me, you know what? I know you work on the Giants. You're a great guy. You bring a lot to the table. You seem like you're really a good reporter, too. Why don't we give this sideline reporter thing a try? Because they had only had a play-by-play guy and an analyst. And he said, we're going to do this. What I later found out was from one of his other people in the office, and he admitted it to me, that first year when they hired me out and then they had me come in and do sideline reporting, it was basically a tryout. I didn't really know it at the time, but they wanted to give it a try to see how much I could truly add to the broadcast. Because let's face it, it's a small conference. They don't have a huge budget. I wasn't getting paid a lot to do it. I just wanted to do it. Well, as it turned out, because I was so good at sideline reporting that year, not only did they keep the job, and of course made me their primary sideline reporter, it lasted for well over 20 years. And until they finally now, because of the way that the games are done technically, and they do them on internet now instead of using a real truck and a whole ball of wax and everything. Now they finally, with cutbacks, they've gotten rid of that. But up until that time, it was because of my success and proving to them that a really good sideline reporter can be an asset and can be of value, that I got hooked up with the conference. And then, of course, after doing several years of sideline, I would say to them, well, I'd like a few shots at play-by-play if they come available. And that's how that whole thing happened. So I get to do better. What I love about it is, for years, I've gotten to do the best of both worlds. I love being a sideline reporter because instinctively I'm a people guy, and I really love to dig out information. I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but when you see a guy twist his ankle on the court, that's when the antenna goes up. Because if you're a sideline guy, now the adrenaline starts pumping. Boom, 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 boom. I got to get that injury. I got to know what happened to that guy. I got to know if he's coming back into the game. I got to know if he's not, who are they going to use to replace him? You know? So as soon as that happens, now you get jacked up because now you're running over to the bench and you're observing and you're watching and you're saying, okay. And now you're telling your producer, all right, I got a report. Let me tell you what's going on. He says, okay. The play-by-play guy throws it to you. You now have to describe succinctly, factually, and completely what you saw, what you know, and what the status is going forward. There's a great rush in doing that. So I really do enjoy being a sideline reporter because I take the job seriously. I believe that any time an announcing team sends the camera and microphone to the sideline reporter for a hit, they better say after that hit that I learned something and it was worth something. To me, it is criminal for a sideline reporter just to say something that everybody else already knows, or that you could see on the screen yourself, or that the play-by-play guy could tell you himself. It's like, why did we waste our time going to that person? Now, again, I'm not Miss America, okay? Maybe Miss America can get away with doing something like that. But you're going to put me on the screen? I better bring you some beef.
Right.
So I take that job very, very seriously and enjoy it tremendously. I won't say I enjoy it as much as play-by-play, but it's really, really close.
Paul, when you're gathering information and giving it out, what's the differences in your thought style when you're doing something either like for print versus radio and television?
Well, I think my training in print, being that I meshed both careers together, you know, because I worked at the Record for over 30 years as a researcher, as a writer, as a copy editor. I mean, I did a tremendous amount of things there. I did everything in the newspaper business you could do in the sports. I was in the sports department, by the way. So I feel that if you're a radio guy, especially, okay, but it also applies to TV too. If you hone your reporting skills on the newspaper desk first, you will be a better radio or TV guy as you develop those skills later on in your career. I don't think there's any question that organizing thoughts, editing your thoughts, knowing what questions and follow-up questions to ask, those are all skills that you have to develop as a newspaper guy, okay? And if you can do that first and then go into TV and radio, it's a piece of cake. I believe I'm a much better broadcaster, okay? Announcers just talk. Broadcasters think and talk. I think I'm a much better broadcaster because of my time in the newspaper business.
So obviously, come 2009, you've been the beat writer for a long time. You're doing the TV stuff with Northeast Conference. So how did the opportunity come about for you to join WFAN and the Giants television broadcasts?
Well, that's kind of complicated. From being at FUV, while I was doing that, the Connecticut Radio Network, CRN, was syndicating the Giants radio broadcasts throughout New England.
Wow.
They had a guy coming down who was the host of their own pregame show. They didn't carry the WNEW pregame show. They carried their own and then would just pick up the game cast from the kickoff. Their host would come down with a producer, and every week, once a week at practice, they would do the interviews that they wanted to use on their pregame show. Well, this is where being in the right place at the right time comes into play. Remember what I said to you? Since I was 5, I wanted to be a Giants announcer, okay? And everything I did was designed to make that happen. So here I am working for WFUV in 83 and in 84. Now I'm going into the season of 1985, knowing I'm graduating in the spring of 86. And I'm thinking to myself, what if I can't get a real professional radio station to hire me? This may be my last shot of doing Giants football. 83, 84, 85. That may be all I get. These may be the greatest 3 years of my career that I get to live my dream, and it could all be over at the end of the 1985 season. Well, what happens? The spring of 85, at the mini camp, the guy from CRN says to me, you know what? Our host has to come down here with me. We have to waste a whole day driving down from Connecticut. We have to drive down here every Wednesday during the season to get these interviews. You're here. Are you still going to be here? I said, well, I will for another year, and I hope beyond that. He goes, I tell you what, why don't we hire you out to be our pregame show player interview guy? And you will do our player interviews for our pregame show. We'll pay you a very small nominal fee, but this way, my host can stay up here doing what he does. I can stay up at my place. We don't have to drive all the way down here from Connecticut. We're tired of doing it. It's a hassle.
Yeah.
You would be doing us a favor. And they threw me a couple of bucks. Of course, now I would have paid them, you know. So that's how it started. And that's how I got my first paid gig doing Giants football, because in the season of 1985, I was doing the pregame show interviews for the Connecticut Radio Network. And of course, now being there doing that, then I wound up contacting WFAN and saying to them, because now again, I don't know how long this is going to last. So I'm contacting Mike Breen over at WNBC, because he was working with Jack Spector doing the sports show in those days. Jack Reynolds, I think, was doing the sports show in those days. Was it Jack Spector? It was Jack Spector. And I contacted Mike, and Mike said, no, we don't have any place for you necessarily. Well, I contacted the Fan. And lo and behold, as it turned out, you know, the way the Fan was doing their juggling and putting reporters in and doing this and doing that, they were like, you know what? Yeah, we could use somebody who's going to be at practice every day. And that's how I first got hooked up with the Fan. Actually, I've been with WFAN 3 different times. I was with them initially there in I wound up being there in the late 80s. Then I left there because WNEW 1130 offered me the actual Giants pregame show host job. And to take that job, I had to leave WFAN. I couldn't stay on both stations. But the Giants were being broadcast on WNEW 1130. The station controlled the broadcasts. And John Kennelly, his contract had run out. He was their sports director and their pregame show host. And he was not being renewed. And they said to me, do you want to host the show? I was like, are you kidding me? I'm gonna be part of game day? Absolutely. So I had to leave the fan. WFAN later on in 1995, okay, they bought the rights to Giants radio from WOR because the Giants radio had gone from 1130, which then became WBBR. They went to WOR 710. We were at WOR 710 for a few years, and then WFAN bought the rights to the Giants. So I went with the Giants broadcast team over there. Then my contract ran out. Okay, I had a multi-year contract. My contract ran out, and WFAN decided they wanted one of their full-time people to do the Giants instead of having me come in. So what happened? Bill Daughtry was full-time. He replaced me on WFAN on the Giants pregame show. Many years go by. Now, during this time, I wound up covering the Giants I was the second guy. All the newspapers have at least two guys on the Giants. Well, I was appointed the second guy writing for the Bergen Record on the Giants. So I would write Giants football twice, sometimes three times a week, behind Vinny Detrani, who was the legendary 7-time Hall of Fame nominated NFL writer. You can imagine what a thrill that was for me too. So fast forward. So during this time frame now, the 16 years or 13 years or whatever it was that I was not on the fan, I covered the Giants for the paper. I covered the Giants. I did some work with the MSG Giants Today show that was on years ago. I was with them for a couple of years, and then they had budget cuts, and I lost that. But I was still doing the Giants with the paper. Then ESPN 1050 opened up, and as they were preparing to open, I called them up, and I said, "Hey, you guys are going to open up. You're going to be a 24/7 sports station. You're going to need people on these teams." Well, I've been around the Giants since 1983. I mean, I've worked for a number of different people over that time, but I've been around every year since '83. You know, I know as much about this team as anybody. And of course, my reputation, thank goodness, preceded me. They knew of me. They asked around. They found out really good things. And they said, yes, when we open, we want you to be our Giants guy. So I wound up with ESPN 1050, I want to say for 9 years. I was co-hosting an NFL show on Sunday mornings for them, a Giants Jets show with Peter Schwartz, and then later on Larry Hardesty. And of course, I was the Giant beat guy. So that was a great thrill. And I was, that's how I covered Super Bowl 42 for ESPN 1050. I covered Super Bowl 35 with the Bergen Record. I was a writer. That's the only one I was a writer for. The other ones I was a broadcaster, but that one I was a writer for. So then, now 12 years ago, going back from today, WFAN was having a change in their personnel. The Giants were expanding their broadcast division to add more web and television to their broadcasting as they took the business inside. And both of them came to me at the same time. The Giants came to me and said, we would like you to do some internet programming for us. And WFAN said, well, we'd like you to be our Giants reporter again. And so it was a match made in heaven because both entities wanted me to cover the Giants. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is like the perfect storm. And now here we are, 12 years later. And I'm with WFAN for now my third go round. And I'm also with the Giants broadcast team. So it's all good. It's all good, fellas. I'm sorry if that was a long story, but you kind of asked. I kind of got to tell you.
That was perfect.
Third time's the charm, huh?
Well, whatever. Look, I hope it's the last time. I don't want to have to go away and come back again.
No, I hear you. We know you're gonna have to go soon, so we're gonna start to wrap up here. Everything you've done so far and given us has been outstanding. We can't wait.
We'll have to edit this down, I'm sure, because I've given you much too much.
No,
Let's
no,
sum
the
up.
full show is going up. It's great information. Can't cut anything.
I do want to ask you quickly before we do let you go. You just keep mentioning interviews. Your career spans over 30 years exclusively with the Giants. You have to give us off the top of your head just a few players, your favorite players you got to interview, whether it was on the field or behind the scenes, and some of your favorite coaches as well.
Well, it's impossible for me not to give you Parcells and Coughlin
Right.
as my two favorite all-time coaches. How could I not? You know, I tell people all the time, I came in during the golden era of the NFL and of the football giants. Okay. I've been to all their Super Bowls. In '86, when they were at Pasadena, I was covering for CRN, but they didn't have the money or the budget to send me out to Pasadena. So what I did was I bought my own tickets. And I bought my own plane fare and my own hotel. And I went out to Pasadena with a guy named John Pizzullo, who was wound up working for Sports Ticker for a long time. I think right now he's with CBS Sports Internet Division. John was my best friend in college. And the two of us went out to Pasadena, and I sat there in the stands as a fan for Super Bowl 21. It was weird because I was covering the team, but I couldn't cover the Super Bowl. Well, because remember now, again, I wasn't part of the Giants official crew. I was with the Connecticut Radio Network, which was an offshoot.
Right.
So the league wasn't going to accredit me, and the network wasn't paying me to go. So if I wanted to go, I had to go myself. And you could bet you there's no way in heck I wasn't going to be there. So that one I went on my own as a fan. All the other ones I was paid to go as a worker, either as a radio, TV guy, or as a newspaper guy. So the question about my favorite guys, I have to be very grateful to everybody I knew in '83, that entire coaching staff, but specifically Bill Parcells, Wellington Mara, George Young, Tom Boyster, all those people, okay, who taught me not only the game of football and the philosophies of how it works and the business of how it works and the X's of O's and how it works, but the psychology of how the game works. And also, because they gave me the opportunity, and I was so eager to soak it up like a sponge. To this day, Carl Banks calls me the Bill Parcells whisperer, okay? Because I soaked it all in. I still quote Parcells all the time. If you guys listen to anything that I do, I quote Bill all the time. George Young, too. I learned so much from them that I will always be indebted to those guys, because that's when I started. That's when I cut my teeth. And I wouldn't be the reporter I am today. And I probably wouldn't even be doing this if I, because I wouldn't have been good enough. I'd like to believe the reason that I'm still doing this going into my 39th year is because I'm good at it. I'd like to believe that. I don't think anybody just says for 39 straight years, multiple organizations, that you've got to keep doing this if you're not that good at it. Those guys set the foundation for me. They gave me the knowledge, and they quenched my thirst and made me even more thirsty to be the best football beat guy that I could possibly be. So for that reason, those guys from 1983 are very special to me. Parcells, the front office, the ownership, they will always be very special to me. Aside from that, yes, Tom Coughlin, very, very special to me. Dan Reeves was a hell of a guy, and he's a special guy. Now, of course, I wasn't as close with Dan as I was with Bill, but I have great respect for Dan Reeves. I will also tell you, my favorite player was always Phil Simms. From the time, before I was on the beat, he was drafted in '79. Phil's my favorite player. And to this day, I when I see him, I always call him number 11. Okay, that's just the way it is. I always call, hey 11, how's it going? He's number 11 to me. He's my favorite guy. But I have so many who are my favorites, because when you work around a team as long as I have, you get a bond with a lot of these guys. Harry Carson, George Martin, Carl Banks. I don't want to start naming guys because I'm going to leave guys out. Joe Morris, It's ridiculous. I will tell you this, though. It's a tremendous source of pride for me that I got along very well with Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor could be very moody. He could be very cranky. He could be very obnoxious at times. Lawrence Taylor never once turned me down for an interview, never once stood me up after he granted an interview. Did he not show? He always held true to his word for me and always treated me with respect. He did not do that to probably 95% or 90% of the media. There was a select group of guys that he always treated with professionalism and respect. Dave Anderson of the New York Times, Jerry Eisenberg of the Ledger, Russ Salzberg of Channel 9, Vinny Detrani of the Bergen Record, and myself. We were very lucky in that regard to have the good part of Lawrence always address us. That means a lot to me because Lawrence Taylor, as you know, has had a lot of difficulties in his life and did not always treat people very well by his own admission. That means something to me. So I put him in a special category as well. But, again, Captain for Life, Harry Carson, George Martin, so many of them. I don't want to leave anybody out. It's been a phenomenal ride, fellas. Quite frankly, Eli Manning's a very special guy to me too. Eli has always been phenomenal to me. And so yeah, I can't really name all of them because it would take forever.
No, I totally understand. Paul, I want to thank you. You had extraordinarily high energy and it was infectious. Nick and I felt it the whole time. And this lived up to the potential that we thought it was going to live up to. Usually we do give our guests the last words. However, I don't think what you would say would be able to top the stories that you just told us, especially about Lawrence Taylor. He's a very, very special person. And your bond, obviously, with Giants ownership, the front office, players, coaches, for the better part. Now it's almost 4 decades now. I don't think it's going to be matched by a lot of people out there over the course of our lives.
Well, Sid Dorfman of the Minnesota newspapers, now he just passed away and he was 100 years old. And I believe he covered the Vikings for over 65, might have been 70 years.
Wow.
Might have been 70 years he did the Vikings. So I don't know if I can break that record, but I think he's the longest active, well, not active anymore, but the longest tenure of covering one team in the National Football League. Because I think he was there when they first started in the 60s, when they first came in as an expansion team. So I don't know if I can beat that, but I'll tell you what, I'm not against trying.
There you go. That's what you got to do. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk about your career with you. We got to get you on again sometime to talk about your Giants memories. It's been an absolute blast, but thank you so much. So that's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our special guest, Paul Dottino. He's on Twitter at GiantsWFan. And for Joe Calabrese, I'm Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.